Facilitated conversation about vacuum chucking. I have been turning since I was 18. I'm now 60 something. And it's gone in and out of my life. I started with my dad. We built a lathe, we built faceplates. Everything was from scratch because my dad was a complete engineer and complete lover of not spending any money. And up until about 3 years ago, the lathe I was using was the one that we built together. No tailstock at all. It was 100% bowl lathe, doing diameters up to 40 inches. But I took one class and realized I got to get one of these. And when I did that, my turning went from all day for one bowl to doing large bowls in a couple hours. So it's been great. I started with Central New England Wood Turners in 1985, 86, something like that. Then stepped away and put a lot of time into my career as a civil engineer. And just recently got back into it a few years ago. And what I'm doing now is I have departed the idea that I have to make everything, because to me, I'd rather turn than make things to turn. And I have also a lot of other things that I like to do that get in the way of turning. So vacuum chucking for me is absolutely brand new. Jim and I got together about a year ago. I had been poking around at it for a year. I've thrown a lot of money at it, and I've made a lot of mistakes with it. So I'm hoping that my mistakes can be brought up to all these people that have been doing it for a while, and we can work through, and I can learn a lot from this presentation myself. So if you can give me 2 seconds, I'm going to pull out a couple of the vacuum sources that I've gotten, and we can go through the whole system. So give me 2 minutes. Okay, my first issue was, how am I going to create a vacuum? What am I going to use for a source of a vacuum? And what I ended up doing was, I'm sorry, am I mumbling again?
No.
Oh, okay.
It's a noise in the background.
All right, cool. So my first route was not actually even a vacuum pump. What I wanted to save money. You have to save money. So I bought one of these vacuum generators, which is basically some valving, an on and off valve, a gauge here. You hook it up to your compressor, and it blows air through, kind of like, it's a Venturi, absolutely Venturi, kind of like blowing over a wine bottle, if you want to call it that. And it basically sucks, it creates the vacuum. I spent a little bit of time with this. They're great, but they didn't do enough for me. So it's a great little tool. I'm not going to tell anybody not to use them. Remember, I'm new to this, and I've spent a little bit of time on it. Some people may love it. I don't. It's not one that's really worked well for me.
Does it not create enough vacuum?
It doesn't create enough vacuum. It's the hold fast system from Craft Supply. They give you tubes like this, which is great. Their rotary union is a little bit light. So basically, where that blue hose is, that connects back to your vacuum generator, and this goes through your headstock. You clamp it on down, and it draws the vacuum through the end of this tube right here. It just seems a little flimsy for me. It worked well. I'm not pulling a vacuum on a bowl like this. What I use a vacuum chuck for is really getting to places that I can't get to. Like on a bowl like this, where what I wanted to do is I wanted to keep the round form all the way around, that dome-shaped form. I wanted to just miss the table. But how do you get to this spot? how do you get to this spot? So basically I was trying to vacuum this on and get so I could turn in between these carved legs here. Similarly, on the bottom side of a box lid, you end up with something like that. How do you turn it smooth? So I would suck this on in, and my use is basically for lids and bottoms of bowls and places you can't get to.
The thing I'll add to that is you got to have a big air compressor that has a good cycle, duty cycle, because it'll run constantly.
Absolutely, absolutely right. And you're constantly looking at that little tiny gauge to make sure you're holding vacuum, because if not, it's coming at you.
Does that work on compressed air?
It's all compressed air. The compressed air comes through here, it's drawing a vacuum through there, and there's got to be a vent back here to...
Like a racket?
No, it's just a constantly of the compressor, and then a light as it's coming through here.
Jim, how many inches of vacuum are you looking for?
Oh God, help, anybody?
So this one is, and mine is similar, about 25 inches of mercury is about the max for, and that pump there is probably about the same, about 25 inches of mercury, which equates to about 12.25 psi. So for every square inch of surface area you have, you're pulling 12 pounds. So if you do the math, which I just did this morning, if you do the math on a 6-inch bowl that's solid, that has good vacuum, you should be, if my math is correct, you should be pulling that bowl onto your vacuum plate by about 350 pounds.
Yeah, which if you do a large diameter thing and put on a large vacuum chuck and you turn thin, you can distort the bottom of your
Or implode them. I've never done it, but there's some people around the room who have done it. And so it's just something you have to watch as you're pulling the vacuum and how big an area you're pulling.
If they crack, they fly off.
There's a big hole. There's a big hole. There's a big hole. So you may ask, why do I need a vacuum chuck? You don't. You really don't. You really don't. There are so many different ways of chucking things these days. It's a convenience, and for me, it's a speed thing. I don't know what your thoughts. You guys all use them. Probably half of you guys use them. For me, it's a convenience. It's a quick change convenience type of thing. So
I use them almost exclusively for turning the tenon off the bottom of a bowl, finishing the bottom of a bowl.
yeah, there you go. There you go. But we all know there are multiple ways of doing this.
I was using cold gels. I just got sick of changing them all the time. And I'm like, this is just easier.
Exactly right. Or you can do a jam chuck and then take that little last piece off with a chisel. But I mean, it doesn't give you a nice turned bottom. This is one that I did, and I did just that. I turned it down to a little tiny tenon on a jam chuck, and then sanded it away. And it's not perfect. It's really not perfect.
One of the problems of using that little pin at the bottom is sometimes that wood will break off instead of cut off. When it comes to less than a 1/16 of an inch, and you'll end up with a 1/16 of an inch hole that you can't refill. It just
Right, so this is that classic example. There's a minor little tenon on the bottom of it, and I just kept on going in at it, It didn't blow apart. It hasn't blown apart yet. It's not a great candidate for a vacuum chuck because it's a maple burl off of one of my trees at home, and it's got holes throughout. They're like little cracks, so it's constantly sucking. Yeah, absolutely right. And so there are multiple ways of skinning the cat.
Depending on the weight of it, I've taken this tendency to return the tenon on a first turn to bowl when I'm about to do the second one, so I can screw that up and then I can flip it around on a regular chuck.
Right.
But it really depends on the size and the weight.
Right, absolutely right. Source of vacuum. I've got two different vacuum pumps that I've gotten here. This one I got from Harbor Freight. This was the first one I got, and in all fairness, I really got it for stabilizing wood. It's an oil-filled an oil-filled vacuum pump, so you're constantly looking at the gauge and making sure you got enough oil. Right now I don't. But to me it uses oil, and the big question that I've always had is, where is it going?
Comes out of the shop, you're breathing it in.
Right, you're breathing it in. There's a Jim will tell a story where he was using one of these for a couple hours, and he looked up, and everything was foggy. And so I moved away from this. I still use it for stabilizing. They're quiet as hell, but I wouldn't use it for a long-term solution. This one I just got probably about 4 months ago. It's a dry pump. It's got a muffler on it. It came to me basically built. So all I really needed to do was take it off this fitting here and get it back to the lathe itself. How many of you guys actually use vacuum chucks? So like half, absolutely half. That's great, because you can tell me everything that I've done wrong now. Key to the system is the rotary union, which is, in this case, I just bought mine from Robust. So they make their own rotary union, plugs into the back of the headstock right in through there, and uses the void through the headstock as its channel to come to the vac chuck. So really, really important. As we go a little deeper into this conversation, there are a bunch of handmade rotary unions over there and other ways of doing this. This is just the way I did it. I did it all with compressor hose and quick connects, so I can get in it and out, in and off it really quickly. And it seems to work really, really well. There is no, this hose doesn't move at all when you turn it on, when you turn the lathe on and turn the vac pump on.
Is there a speed limitation?
I haven't had a speed limitation. This is the final part of what I do, so I'm at that point I'm like really spooked on whether I'm going to ruin what I've got on there, so I'm not like really ripping the lathe. So
What did that cost?
the rotary union,
Yeah.
again, as much as you want to spend. I bought this straight from Robust, so it was $90.
It cost him $9,000 so he could buy that.
Absolutely, absolutely right. But I know a bunch of other you guys have actually converted. You had a source, Ron.
Well, okay, so I've done a bunch of different things for vacuum chucking, and I came across a place for rotary unions that was affordable. If anybody wants it, contact me, I'll forward the link to you. So if you buy a regular rotary union, you can be looking at hundreds of dollars, okay? And they're speed related, okay? I think the one I came across, Jim, what was it, 60 bucks or something? Jim Forbes in here? Oh, you messed it up. So, this is the rotary union that I came across, okay? And it was affordable, but it's only, I think it's theoretically max for like 400 RPM, 500 RPM. I've done it with the homemade thing and whatnot, but, you know, now when I use mine, I actually made a Morse taper piece that 6 into the lathe, and I screw this into that's where Jim actually screws this into a
The actual chuck. The actual chuck.
okay,
Yeah.
well, I use the thread of my lathes, so everything that has the thread that I have, and I can take anything and screw on any machine, and I just slip the thing in as I have different size tubing to go with. Okay, but
I have a one-way, order from one-way. It works really great.
Yep.
Slips over this end here, you have to take the
Yep.
wheel off. And I don't know if they had any speed limitation, I never looked at it, but. You know,
Yeah, I just liked.
1,200.
I liked getting it from the company because it was form, fit, function for this lathe.
Yeah.
These guys spend a little bit more time like thinking it through and spending time on it. This was a buy it and fix and go. The other thing that's important is a filter. Make sure you have a filter because you're sucking everything, all that dust, all those particles you're sucking into the actual vacuum pump, and that can over time ruin the vacuum pump.
Those filters, I just replaced mine. It's just a fuel filter, many auto parts store.
Right. This is a little bigger than I usually see for like a lawnmower filter, but yeah, you're exactly right.
That's about the size of the one I had.
Okay, I didn't bring any of my stuff in, but one thing I highly recommend is that you set up a gauge to show the vacuum that you're drawing. Okay, because you want to make sure you're pulling vacuum before you turn that sucker on. Okay, if you have a leak and whatnot, so on my gauge it goes up to, I think it's 70 atmospheres, 65 atmospheres. And if I don't have a good seal, I might only be drawing 20 atmospheres. Okay, well, if I'm only getting 20 atmospheres, I want to make sure I find out why. Okay, because if you're not pulling a good vacuum,
Don't
you
turn
can
it
throw
on.
your piece.
Don't turn it on.
Okay, so
Do not turn it on.
I actually have a valve connected to a filter for air coming in, and then that's when I close the valve and I'm drawing a vacuum. I'm watching my vacuum gauge. Okay, it's something from Harbor Freight or something, whatever. But I would not run vacuum without being able to tell how much vacuum you're pulling. Okay.
Do you find that you have to tape the end grain to prevent leakage from the end grain?
I have not found that personally yet, but has anybody else? I mean, obviously you're not doing pecky wood. If you're doing pecky wood, you don't even draw a vacuum.
Doing the red oak sometimes.
Yeah.
I have that problem. But basically, my vacuum pump will overcome that.
Sometimes if I finish the bowl, or I'm in the process of putting finish on there, it'll suck actually. You can see it showing up on the other side is pulling up wet on.
Pulling.
True with oil finishes
Yeah,
and
yeah.
stuff, because they aren't cured.
Exactly.
Okay, so cherry is notorious for what you're talking about. And,
Maybe that's good, stabilizes.
well, no, because what ends up happening is because it's pulled the oil finish through, there's actually a darker color, okay? So in reality, I don't use vacuum chucking for removing tenons. I use basically vacuum chucking basically for applying finish, honestly. I have so many means to take tenons off and so on and so forth that I don't use the vacuum chucking often for that application. I still do live edge bowls, natural edge bowls and stuff, but in reality, for me, it's for applying finish, okay? It's so simple. I make these little foam brushes out of cosmetic wedges and put it on there, turn it slow, and I do one side at a time, so I'll take it off and do the next one, so on and so forth. That's just Ron's thing, you know.
Chucks themselves, this is the spending money solution for them. These are from like I think it's Hold Fast. These were the ones that came with that kit. They're fairly effective, but Jim and others have now perverted my mind into making them from scratch. The good thing about it is you've got ultimate flexibility in the chuck that you create. Now, the toughest example so far for me and turning lids has been this little guy. Trying to always push the limit. I tried to go as small as I could go because I wanted to turn the inside of this top, but that's not a huge area to suck on. So I made this awful chuck here, which is just basically a standard chuck, piece of cherry I put on it, and a rubber washer, and it held it enough to do some light turning on the back and clean up the back a little bit more. So I found that the smaller that you go, the harder it is. You just don't.
The less square inches you have to.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Jim, I noticed you had one of them over here out of PVC, I think, that's really long. He actually got a big bolt,
A nut.
a big nut, excuse me, I'm a nut, a big nut, and basically pulled it into the back.
I would recommend getting a spindle tap for your machine, okay? I'm looking at all these chucks here, I'm seeing all these face plates, even though they're cheap on Amazon, you know, that's a lot of money tied up for that, where a spindle tap, it's a once and done deal. The only thing is, if you're using wood for your vacuum chuck base material, take the time to seal it well. Okay, you can use plywood, use whatever, but make sure that you seal it so it'll draw the vacuum.
I did that, and what I did is when I made it out of, I don't know, some hardwood, put a little dado or something in it, and put an O-ring there.
Yep.
And that's very effective.
I didn't seal this, and it was hard to draw a good vacuum off it. And that's
Again, because these faceplates aren't made for vacuum chucking, I would highly recommend making something as a seal where it meets the face of the lathe. Okay, because it doesn't take much to lose some of your vacuum capability. Okay, so.
I've never had that issue with these, but you can buy pretty inexpensively just those plastic washers if it becomes a problem for you. But with any of those that I've made and used, there's always been a perfectly good connection between the faceplate and the lathe.
Jimmy,
I ran out of face plates, and because I wanted a variety of sizes, and I went to McMaster-Carr or MCS, I don't remember which, and bought a 33 millimeter nut to go on my one-way, which is, you know, not your standard size. Like, is that 33 or is that what, inch and an eighth?
Inch and a quarter.
Inch and a quarter, 8.
This is 33 millimeter. I just bought a half a dozen nuts for less than $5, I think. And I just bore a hole in a piece of MDF with a chisel, cut the corners off, and here's the other one, and made myself a bunch of quick and easy, inexpensive chucks with some MDF. This isn't even MDF, this is just a piece of maple. I used Gorilla Glue as a seal around it. I do have an O-ring at the bottom of the nut to seal against my spindle. And on my system, I just have a piece of pipe thread at the bottom of that, and I just, with this lamp cord, lamp rod, threaded lamp stock, just screw it in, a little piece of ribbon dope around it to give me a good seal. And that just goes through my headstock and screws right into the nut, and I have a seal. Nothing leaks. Ron brought, I was making my own rotary unions, unlike this guy who spends a lot of money on nice, fancy, brand new stuff. I'm Scottish, and I have to go cheap. So I made my own rotary unions, and it's a double sealed bearing, 2 double sealed bearings with O-rings in it. It works great. Plugs into my system. Peter James put together an article in the journal, February 2013. Everybody's got a copy of the 2013. If you don't, it's online. Go online, look at the February 2013 $100 vacuum chuck. Peter James sent me an email back in 2000, March 23rd, 2013. There was his link to an eBay guy who was selling these things, reconditioned, the medical pumps, they reconditioned, and at the time he was selling them for $30 a piece. Now they're, and I paid about $30 plus I think another $5 for shipping.
Were the dinosaurs running around at that point?
They were just, that week had become extinct.
Got it, okay, okay.
That was in 2013, which is 10 years ago, and 11 now. And the price of those things, because of wood turners, have gone from $30 a piece.
That's $275 as of yesterday.
Is that new or used?
I think it's refurbished. This is the Frugal, this is Frugal vacuum guy.
$235. I looked up
$275.
$275. I looked on eBay last night, and you can get refurbished units for $125 if you shop around on eBay.
Right.
And you can get rebuild kits if you have an old one that's not working well for $30, between $15 and $30.
That's not the gas one, is it?
Yeah, that looks like the gas one.
These are,
Because I know the gas one, the last time I checked a few years ago, was like $400 or $500.
the new ones are.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Yeah, the new ones. These were not gas, they were Thompson,
Okay.
Thompson Medical. Yeah, Thompson's. I had a few leakers. Well, I made about 6 of these, gave a couple away, and I had one leaker, and I said, I'm not happy with this the way it's leaking. I can't, when I get up to speed, it gets too hot, and it leaks. And Ron put me onto these Marsmatics. And these Marsmatics are wonderful. Simple, easy, not expensive,
It was under $100.
I bought 2 of them for $88.72 a piece, including freight. $80 a piece.
When you look at them
What do you
online,
pay for
they're
your rotary union
pricey.
system?
The rotary union system from Robust
Robust.
is 90, 95, I think.
You need one quick on off.
Yeah.
You only need one.
That's a good price.
Yeah.
Because one way was, one way wanted for their rotary union,
It's just over $100. It was a couple of years ago.
Yeah, the Mosmatic, when I went onto Mosmatic's website, it started blowing me away because they had like 15, 16, 17. Are you using this for more? So I called them up and they're saying, and they said, you're doing what with this? I'll get back to you. They never got back to me.
well, Ron did the research and told me which model number to buy.
There you go.
Well, I was looking, just came across it.
Yeah.
Before I got a rotary union, I actually took my lathes apart, bored it, put a bearing in there, so that I could do what your union is, but it was just a piece that fit into a bearing.
GMF2 and GMF1, I'm not gonna take our lathe headstocks apart and rebore the cylinders. We're just not gonna do that. We'd rather find something that'll fit.
On the lathe I wanted.
Yeah, I think what good is rotary is like 125, because it screws right on too. So
Right, right.
This one here, the way I'm set up,
Format.
just screws right on, really easy. My pump, have had it now for 11 years. It's working fine. If you're tempted to buy the Harbor Freight vacuum pump, please don't. All you're gonna
If you
is-
do, set up a switch, put the unit outside, not an issue. Okay?
Set it outside and only use it on a windy day.
Check the oil.
Because the oil fumes are, you won't see it. It's just a very fine mist that comes out of that Harbor Freight unit, and you won't see it while you're working. But you walk out of the shop and then come back in an hour later and say, why is it cloudy? Where did that fog come from?
Yeah, you think you're getting a deal, and boy, do you get a deal. This, as I said, was, when I got it, I think it was closer to 225, 250. This was like 150, and to me, it's kind of like
You can get
thrown
the Harbor
away.
Freight ones on sale for like $60. The
Yeah.
2.5.
Right.
You know.
So somebody bought one of these at the auction a couple of, well, I don't know, more years ago at the auction. And I don't know who bought it, but I apologize to you. It was my Harbor Freight unit that I even gave him the oil that I bought with it. And I do apologize.
Kelly Lamont at the last meeting that was doing stabilization was using the oil, and they're excessively quiet. They just hum. They're really quiet when you're not using them at all, too.
I think you don't know how quiet they are because of the fog of oil fume from them.
So I start off with a Harbor Freight vacuum pump, and I actually fitted a car oil filter to try to minimize the amount of mist that came out of it, and it didn't work. Okay, so I set mine up when I was using it, set it outside. I had some fobs to turn it on and off, and then again the gauge tells you if the damn thing's running.
Great.
A couple of comments on making chucks or the holders. I use couplers from Home Depot. I use Gorilla Glue and put it on nice and thick and spread it around so I get a nice seal. And I have a variety of sizes and lengths. Sometimes I have a natural edge bowl or something that has high wings and I need to get into, hold it. This is kind of small for a natural edge bowl, but a nice deep one. But I want you to be careful of the foam that you're using. I use this tailgate weather strip. Beautiful stuff, nice shape to it, nice thick foam. Only problem with it is so much cushion that if you take a heavy cut, your bowl is going to move with that cushion. You got to be careful. You're better off with a thin seal rather than a thick seal. Because this one here, I've got to be very careful with my cut, very light cuts, because the bowl will move in and out on you, which is what you don't want when you're turning. But a thin, the weather seal from Home Depot, air conditioner weather seal, pressure sensitive, put it on, wrap it around. It does a pretty good job. You want to make sure it's closed cell foam. But any closed cell foam will work. I got
You go to Walmart and get the sheets of thin foam
material. It's just a mil or so thick and cut them out. It's really cheap.
I got some of that from Michael's, and I was disappointed.
This came,
It to be
pass that around, but that came
pressure
from Michael's.
sensitive on the back, and it wasn't. It didn't have any pressure sensitive on the back. If it had pressure sensitive, it would be really helpful.
So when I was getting into this, my mindset was completely fixated on these can-shaped chucks as being like, that's the shape I've got to go with. That's the shape I've got to go with. Don's got some flat ones over here, which, my first argument coming into my head is there's not a big square area to hook them up. But in reality, he'll suck the vacuum from the back of this, and the bowl creates the volume. Go ahead.
All right, so this is one that I made. This is a very expensive faceplate according to Ron. This is a piece, the wood here is a piece of LVL. So you go to any lumberyard, they've got LVL cutoffs. These things are very, very stable. And so you screw this on the chuck, you glue it on, and then you turn it flat and round. And it'll stay put for the rest of your life. It won't move, it won't warp. And so I use these primarily when I'm turning the bottom of a twice turned bowl. The bowl sits on a maximum area of suction. And I think I said earlier, a 6-inch bowl on a chuck like this, you can draw 300, 350 pounds of force to hold that on the chuck. I line it with before I cut the tenon off, I usually will have a mark for the lie center, so I'll align it with a lie center on the lathe, and then spin it up and go to work and unless the bowl is compromised, really not worry about it coming off.
What's the material you used on the black stuff?
This is, it's just a closed cell foam from Amazon. I can look it up and send you the link if you're interested, but it's, as Jim said though, don't get this stuff too thick. So you want to keep it, you know, thin enough so that you can draw a vacuum and not so thick that it kind of floats around.
I will say something about, if you go to use black rubber, be cautious because it can actually discolor your bowl, okay?
Which is why I started using the flat chucks, because sometimes with this, you go on the inside of the bowl, you can leave a mark in there, and then you're in there with some fine sandpaper or steel wool or something getting that out. But if you have a live edge bowl, or if you have a once turned bowl where the edge is kind of wonky, obviously you can't use the flat one. So you go inside the bowl with something like this. But
If you mess around with once turned bowls, it's very, very, very possible you have to use a thicker
Padding.
connection, okay? Because once turned bowls distort, and, you know, just keep that in mind.
Just some sheets of closed cell foam, the kind that, you know, you all might give you to stack plates and box. And it's about the right size and it really works well.
I have a yoga mat that I cut up for whatever reasons, and I've had to use that for the extra thickness on something that was really,
Did you really have to cut up the yoga mat?
I bought it for that.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Do I look like I use a yoga mat? No, come on.
he wore it out, so he.
Yeah, he wore it out. He wore it out. There you go. So the other thing that Don just reminded me about was centering your bowl on the chuck. Jim's got this neat little Morse taper chuck holder that I don't think I've been looking for. I can't find them, but it allows you to thread your
Craft supply, so.
Or Penn State.
really okay. All right, cool. And it allows you to reverse and
So this-
keep the same center.
There's an adapter that you can buy. This is a 3/4 10 on these.
Yep.
There's an adapter that you can buy to go in your chuck. You just screw that onto this.
Great.
Screw your chuck onto that.
Great, there you go. That way you're not trying to keep that registration point on everything that you do.
Well, typically what I'll do, and I showed this to Bill last night, but, so we have a 10, we have a mark from the Life Center. And so normally I would just replace it on the tailstock, bring it up, tighten it up. That's it. You're done. You're fine.
That's kind of what I'm doing, and I didn't know if I was doing something wrong by not using something like that, which basically you can screw whatever chuck you're using onto this, and basically, as long as you don't take it off the bowl, just basically put it into your tailstock, and it's exact.
That's not a live one. I never take when I'm turning, I put it in my chuck and I reverse it. I keep it on the chuck. I never move the chuck or the wood from the chuck, because those 4 jaws, they're not all exactly,
Right.
You're not gonna get a precise registration. I take the chuck off the headstock, turn it around and put it on the tailstock with that adapter that fits on my one-way live center.
The 3/4 10, yeah.
And I just put the chuck on the one-way and then replace the headstock, put a vacuum chuck, whatever size I want, on the headstock.
And that'll give you the best run out.
Perfect, yeah, I always
Yeah.
have perfect alignment that way.
What is the tool that goes on the adapter that you're talking about here?
So it's a threaded adapter, so the internal thread matches this 3/4 10. The external thread, it has a shoulder on it, like that.
Like that.
So this will match the spindle thread.
And so where do you get one of those adapters? Is it
Craft supply.
one of those?
Craft supply, Packard,
Yeah.
Actually,
Penny
packet
is-
head, no, that's the deal.
I think Penn State.
So that's basically what I have. This presentation has kind of followed a Bill Noble article that he put together. It's like a 37-page article. I've made 10 copies of it if people are really interested in having it. So I've got that along that people can take if they want them. But I really open it up to any questions or comments from the crowd. Fire.
When you're putting a vacuum on a large bowl,
Yep.
you mentioned that you get like 300 and something pounds of force. Are there any guidelines in lessening the vacuum? Because you don't want 300 pounds that might deform the bowl or do other things to it. So you lessen the vacuum, so because you don't need 300 pounds. So how much would you lessen the vacuum so that it works, but you don't lose the bowl? Any guidelines on that?
What I do is I just put it full bore. And I hope that it doesn't blow up. Guys, do you have standards?
I have homemade, I did a homemade
Chart?
thing, and I put a little bleed valve
Got it.
so that I can just lead the vacuum off a little bit and get it where I want to. That's all.
So another way to think about that is the standard atmosphere is 29.9 inches. So if you're at 27 suction on the inside, the atmosphere is pressing on the outside to hold it there, right? So this comes from the world of bag veneering and how that works. So you can think about it that way. I mean, even on the highest pressure system we'd ever see around here, you might see 31 inches on it. Crazy blue sky day.
Right. So we draw typically 25 PSI, or 25 inches at the most. Usually around, if it's below 18, I get worried that I don't have a good seal, or I don't have something's leaking. I'll go in and take a look at the piece of wood again and see if I should seal it up a little or put a little tape over it to slow it down. Sometimes you can put a little finish on it to slow things down. You gotta be careful you don't suck that finish into your pump. Yeah, I think everyone who's got one of these setups has a filter
On it.
the inside, on the inlet side of their pump, so they're not sucking dust into their pump. I have overcompensated. I read Noble's system. It said I should have 5 cubic feet of
Storage.
and so I built this storage system with PVC pipes.
Don't need
And
It looks good.
But
I thought it looked good.
Yeah, it looks good in the shop. I've got this rack of 5 pipes that are my vacuum storage, just in case I lost power. Well, if I'm gonna lose power, my lady's gonna shut off and I'm gonna back away.
I have a valve on my manifold, so once I suck the bowl on, I valve off the vacuum pump and I just wait.
I would not recommend that.
That's you're trusting.
Why not?
Sorry, Tony, but,
No, I don't turn with it that way.
okay.
I turn it, I just want to see if the thing is going to stay.
So as far as the amount of vacuum you're gonna pull, the only time that becomes relevant is if you're turning thin. Okay, that is the only time, if you've got a bowl this big, you're not gonna do any of that bowl. But if you got something that's an 1/8 of an inch thick, and it's
Big.
a shallow thing, large, keep in mind, the larger it is, the more pressure you put in. It's basically hydraulics, okay? The square foot, the square inches, by the pressure of vacuum, you multiply that, and it is relative, it's direct, okay? So unless you're doing a really thin piece, and again, if it implodes or cracks, just as it would crack, and you're spinning at 300 RPM, 400 RPM, that thing's going flying. Okay? So thin is the only time that you would really be concerned about that.
Yeah, so 2 things I'll change the subject for a moment. That adapter that I was talking about, that's a one-way multi-tip revolving center chuck adapter. It's on Craft Supplies for $50. And so the inside, the idea of it is a 3/4 10 to match the live center. The the outside thread match whatever your spindle thread is. And then lastly, when I'm removing the tenon from the bottom of the bowl, I will normally bring it up. I'll leave the live center engaged. I'll remove as much of the tenon as I can with the tailstock still engaged. And then when I get down to a little tiny nub that is not going to take an awful lot of force to remove, then I remove the tailstock and let the vacuum do the rest. But just for safety's sake, I like to leave the tailstock in there until I can't anymore.
I follow the same practice.
The more tangential and away from the center point you have, the more risk you have of just slightly unseating. Right. As soon as you slightly unseat it, it's
You're done, yeah.
Okay, I got something here. I want to read this. Warning, before turning vacuum off, ensure the, before turning the vacuum off, make sure the lathe has stopped. Right there.
Mr. Safety? You're Mr. Safety. Any other questions? Yes, shoot.
I've been experimenting with a different vacuum chuck that comes from a company called Simply Woodworking. The big difference on it is the bearing is on the inboard side of headstock, and then it just comes out as a long tube to the outboard side of it. It's working pretty well so far. I've only used it 2 or 3 times. The only flaw I saw in it is on the handle end, or the outboard side, no, it's got a solid tube on it.
Solid tube.
The tube rattles around.
Make a bushing.
I just, turned the book.
Make a bushing.
Put on it. I should have just found a piece of cork and done it that way.
Just yours?
So if anybody wants a link to the rotary unions I came across,
Glue
just
that name
email
on the
me
bottom.
and I'll,
Got it.
I believe I still have it in my,
Again, that Peter James, he made a bunch of these things for the deal back 10 years ago. People bought them from him, put the systems together, and that's on the website. Summer 2013 journal. You'll see his article there if you want to get an inexpensive way to set it up, and particularly if you have questions about how to set up your gauge on your relief valves on the filters that's pictured here. He's got a good schematic for how to do it. He even shows a picture of the Thompson pump that he uses and how to make your own chucks, how to set it all up, and source list even list a couple of the commercial rotary couplings, and he shows you how to make your own. It's a nice comprehensive article that Peter put together years ago.
Here's the Bill Noble, 37-page. There are 10 copies here. If people are interested, please take them. But I think, any other questions?
If you want to see that Peter James setup, I have one over here. Peter made mine about 8 years ago. And with the metering valve on it, like Don said, if you're going to just take a bowl, you're going to come up and recenter this thing, that's fine. But if you have a flat work that doesn't have any tenon on the back, you can meter that down to 10 or 15 pounds of pressure just to hold it in place, and it's going to allow you to take a flat piece of work and move it till you get to the center that you want on it. Then you can tighten up and pull 25 pounds on it.
If you're a member of AAW, you can go to their resources and look at their winter 2098. David Lancaster has a nice article, Turning Gizmo You Can't Afford to Ignore. That's his article.